All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ursula Bischoff. I am with WestEd. I'm also the project director for an H-1B Technical Skills Training Grant and a Workforce Innovation Fund evaluation funded by the U.S. Department of Labor that funds the TechSF project. I work very closely with the Department of the Office of Economic and Workforce Development in San Francisco and partners in this room at MPICT to run this initiative, and we're delighted today to give you an update on some work we've been doing to help build career pathways to ICT education. So I'd like to also introduce the panelists who are going to join me this morning.
Olivia Herriford, Associate Director of ICT Center.
Mina, Dadgar. I also work with Ursula at WestEd.
Mina, Consulting Center.
So this morning we're going to present information on access barriers and opportunities to ICT career pathways, and a framework for how we've been identifying how to create effective career pathways. Our objectives for the session today are to introduce the systemic process that we use to create career pathways and get your feedback, actually, and hopefully spend most of the session in discussion with you about what we've done and what you think we can do to improve the work we have already set in motion. As I mentioned, TechSF is partnering with the MPICT ICT Pathways project, and we had at TechSF started convening a education pathways working group, and the SF ICT Pathways project was convening stakeholders and invited us to participate, and we got our heads together and said, okay, there's an area that our work intersects, so why don't we establish a San Francisco Education Pathways Working Group to share and leverage the information and the resources that we're developing through our respective projects to advance the goals of both. So what we did was engaged in a pretty substantial visioning and brainstorming session just almost a year ago now, and we identified for our working group 4 areas that we really wanted to focus on. One was addressing barriers and improving access to ICT education. Another was creating websites, and if you were in the last session, you heard about the websites we're creating to improve access to information about ICT careers and pathways to those careers. Another area we decided to focus on was employers, how to engage employers more effectively in our work, and both obtain from them information that could help guide our process and provide them with information so they understood better how to interact with our projects. And another final area was promotion, increasing promotion of the work that we're doing and awareness of our work and awareness of opportunities. So the focus of our session today is the work we've done to address barriers and increase access to career pathways. And Mina will take it away from here.
So just to get a sense of who's in the room, how many of you would self-identify as working at a community college or a community college? Okay, the majority. 4-year colleges? Anyone from 4-year colleges? Yeah. And high school students? CBOs? Nonprofit? Anyone else? Yeah. Career technical assistants, yes. Career ladders. So welcome everyone. So we were, as Ursula explained, also a diverse group of stakeholders coming together with the single objective of, and I'll talk about one of the subgroups, one of our subgroups that was formed out of this joint work was to create greater access to career pathways in ICT within San Francisco. So it's a very broad topic with a diverse group of stakeholders working with different populations. And what we're going to talk about is how we came up with a process to, one, make sure we had a shared understanding and we're talking about the same things as we talked about what kind of projects we could develop together to increase access to these groups, and the other to make sure that our work was research-based, that if we were proposing projects, that their goal was to overcome real documented research, whether that was from reviewing the literature or that was from environmental scans that some of us or other people had done, or even if it was anecdotally, this is a barrier that we're trying to overcome, that we were explicit about this is an anecdotal thing that research has not, that we don't have research on it yet. So these were the two goals of coming up with a framework for developing projects. And the first step was, our goal was to create greater access to ICT careers within San Francisco. And if you look at for the definition of career pathways, you find some things like, you find various things, but one of the things you might find is a combination of formal education, informal training, and work experience that enables you to get to a job in a certain occupation or industry. And that is pretty vague. And the first thing we did was we started with breaking down the idea of pathways to different sections of the pathways for different populations. So if we're thinking about an individual that wants to get to an occupation in ICT, what are the different sections what are the different parts we could start looking at? So one part we started looking at was when you're in a high school or when you're at K-12, you actually need to complete your K-12 education in many cases and make sure that once you complete, you get to college. So that's part of the pathway. We would want to increase the access for that part of the pathway for many students. How do I get?
Oh, it's just the arrow on the bottom.
Is this going to work? What is it? You can click. Oh, I just want to get rid of these. Or thank you. Thanks. So we started with K.
Smaller by going to the left.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah, that might work. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Sure. So one section was K-12, increasing access from K-12 to college, making sure students got to college, make sure they got to college interested in ICT careers, making sure they got to college understanding what career pathways they had in front of them. And the other one, once they got to college, were they able to complete college and find jobs? That was another part of the definition of career pathways. Kind of these were the chewable parts, if you like, something bites that we could actually chew. If they were unemployed, how could we work with unemployed populations, adult learners, how could they find employment in ICT jobs? Some of our grants work with incumbent workers that need to stay in these ICT jobs and get more training. So these were all the various parts that we could now focus at, going from a broad idea to something more concrete. And what we wanted to know was, for each of these groups, what were the main barriers so that we could make sure that our projects are addressing evidence-based problems that actually exist rather than just somebody's idea of something that might help. So the second thing that we did after breaking down pathways into different sections was to say, let's take one of these sections. Most of the people here are from community colleges, working community colleges. What are the barriers to completing a credential in an ICT program and getting a job? And we started reviewing the literature and talking with practitioners and coming up with a list. And actually, first I'll just let you look at the list for a minute, and we get back to this. The first thing that came up was remediation requirements. We would like to, the people we work with, would like to see more students from underrepresented groups, more students from disadvantaged backgrounds to enter ICT programs, complete those programs, and find jobs. Many of those students don't make it to the first college level math or English course because research shows that the majority of at community colleges, about 70% of community college students are assigned to one or more level of remediation. The majority of those students never make it to a college level course. And here we are trying to increase the representation of those students in our ICT courses and support them to complete. So this is a research-based barrier that actually we may or may not be able to address with our project, but it's important to acknowledge that the research shows that a majority of students face this barrier. The outcomes for those students are very poor, and there are some reasons why we know why the outcomes for those students are very poor. For example, that there are many courses that the students have to complete until they get to a college level course for which they can earn credit, and many students drop out in these leakage points from one remedial course to the next, and so on. We also know of innovative solutions. So then the first thing we did was look at barriers, cite evidence, find evidence for the barriers, or first start from the evidence and then say that there is this barrier, and then see who already is working to address these barriers. There's someone here from Career Ladders Project. There is IDES. There are various programs that work to contextualize remedial material into college level courses. So that's one of the things that's one of the innovations. There are ways to accelerate remedial coursework. And this is an example of a project that was discussed with our groups that could contribute to that. So I'm just presenting that as an example. Yes, go ahead.
Just a quick question on in evidence of barriers, the third bullet down.
Yeah.
Is that research about all going into any gatekeeper college course across disciplines?
Good question. I believe, yes. So yes, sure. So the question is, the last bullet for evidence for the barrier says only 20% of students refer to developmental math and 37% refer to developmental reading, go on to pass relevant entry-level gatekeeper college-level courses, and that is in math and English, I believe.
Yeah, so the relevant entry-level gatekeeper, so... We
could have said gatekeeper courses in math and English. So that would be the first college-level math course or the first college-level English course. Yeah.
Even into like ICT or bio.
Right, very good point. So this is, right, and those may be requirements for some ICT courses, yes. So we will give you actually the completed chart. We've just taken one cell out of that chart because we won't have time to go through all of this by detail. But for example, remediation requirements was at the top of our list. This is the rest of the list for the community college section, the barriers that we identified. And we went through this process of gathering evidence, figuring out what the barriers were, and figuring out best practices for each one of these. And I'll just give a minute so people can look at this. Taking another one of these, availability of comprehensive or integrated support services, we have found a lot of research that shows that first generation college students often do not reach out for support. They often do, when support is optional, it's usually the students who have the best college know-how that go to receive support. That the students who need it the most a lot of times don't have the college know-how or the confidence to go and ask for help. So that's a lot of qualitative research has shown this, and there are projects where inclusive support has come in, where support has been offered as part of a classroom, support has been offered as something that is within the schedule of the course. So these are just some of the examples, and I won't go through the list. We will have small group discussion time to actually go through these and discuss them. Are there any questions on this section before we actually talk about projects? Yeah.
Perhaps I missed it, you had said earlier. Are these students that are in college now that have come directly from the high school, or are these older adults?
Very good question. So, yes, sure. So the question was, are we now in this part of the barriers, are we focusing on, and right now we're talking about college to career section, are we talking about students that just came from high schools, or are these some older adults because some returning adults come to community colleges, for example? So that's a really good question. Here we are mainly, because of our projects and our stakeholders, here we are mainly focusing on students that come from high school. Some of high schools also, some of these barriers may be similar for students that are older, but in this case we're not talking about older students. We actually talk about that in another section of our work.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's appropriate, but is there an assumption here that 100% of students applying for college should be in college? I'm not sure I agree with the concept that all people should have access or are capable of completing a college level course. And therefore, if you're going with that concept of 20%, 37%, maybe they're just not college level.
Maybe there. So the question was, right.
Make the college level.
Right. So that's actually that's kind of at the heart of some of these questions. The question was, I'm not sure that all students are college ready, and maybe that is part of the reason why I'm putting assumptions.
College capable.
Are college capable? The college material, let's call it that. That may be.
No matter what, they're just not filled enough to be college level students.
And do we aim for all students to enter college? So that's actually a really big debate, and that could be a reason for a lot of high remediation. I won't go into detail in answering that. So that could be the reason for very high remediation rates. We are talking about 70% of students being placed into remediation, the assumption being they are not ready for, so the assumption either could be they're not ready for college or that they are not capable of completing college. Actually, community colleges are open access institutions, meaning that anybody that comes to community colleges, the assumption is that we will help you make it there. Some research that might be helpful to shed light on that conversation is, the question could be, and I know I'm eating up the time of other people, but I'll say that quickly and we can talk more later, is that research that shows that students are over-remediated. Research that shows that we are actually assigning 70% of students to college level courses, and this is not really directly related to this, but we can talk more about it later, is research shows that students, many of the students who we are placing into remediation actually would have done perfectly well in college level courses, and we can talk about that research later. Let's reserve more time for questions later so we can talk about the actual projects, and Evan, it would be great if you talk about that.
So Mina went over just one particular aspect of the barriers chart and one particular, we saw two barriers under one kind of remediation. The list is robust. You saw the categories that we explored, and there's multiple barriers. And right, these are barriers to access. So regardless of a student's capability, these are things that prevent them from moving on. So we have this huge list. What do we do with it? Let's take it to the street. So the street being the administrators, faculty, and community organization partners in the San Francisco area. In September, we had a summit group where we gathered all these stakeholders together, and we presented, similar to what we just did, we presented the barriers and the process that we went through. We then asked the stakeholders present to talk about their own barriers that they recognize, and then we asked them to go through a process of identifying the criteria. And the criteria, some of the criteria that we looked at was time, how close could this project be done, looked at resources, are there resources available to implement this project to address the barrier, what were some other things, partnerships, other partnerships in place that can help further addressing this barrier. And so we had this criteria, we prioritized the criteria, and then we asked people to vote. And we had the barriers available, and we had them broken apart into the areas of focus that we had: awareness, dual enrollment, CBO linkages, and professional enrollment. Thank you. And we had everybody vote, and of the barriers that were addressed and the projects that were addressed, people broke out into groups to talk about the barrier and then start to talk about ideas on specific projects to help address that barrier. Let's see. So once they formed the working groups, people got together and some people focused on one particular project idea that made a lot of sense. Others threw out a number of projects. Professional development was one particular place where there was a lot of ideas, some really overreaching, some really robust ideas. And then there were some kind of other ideas in the professional development group that were probably going to be challenged in getting started. And so we kind of just talked about how do we address these barriers and how can we create projects around them. So out of that, there was a few projects that came up, and there were some actually already projects that were already started that helped to address the barriers. The Microsoft Digital Literacy project came out of the CBO linkages and TechSF initiative being worked at BATEC. Professional development, one of the things that we heard from teachers at San Francisco Unified is that they also need to get training. They need training. Externships, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with an organization called ISME in the South Bay. They provide externships to teachers all throughout the Bay. We're looking to provide externships specific to ICT right here in San Francisco. And that was one of the projects that came out of that group. Dual enrollment was already in process. However, looking at a summer bridge program where students are getting certificates, and we're enrolling students that are not just in career tech ed programs, but throughout all students at San Francisco Unified. Then an early awareness website was already in effect, and promotional materials also. So these were just kind of some of the projects that came out of looking at the barriers, the evidence, and the best practices. Most of these projects here tie very closely to the best practices that we saw throughout our research. So now we're going to encourage you all to participate in identifying your own barriers.
Yeah, Maureen, District, what we're going to do is distribute the complete, well, a somewhat streamlined version of the chart that we created for the 4 different segments of barriers to accessing pathways to ICT careers. One segment, again, focuses on high school to college. The one that we've started to discuss today focuses on college to career. There's a third that focuses on unemployed to employed, and then a fourth that's still really under development, focusing on incumbent workers. And so what we were thinking we'd really like to do with you today is to allow you to scan this. Would it be reasonable for me to think that most folks in the room would be interested in, taking a closer look at the barriers from college to career? Because what we'd like you to do is read them, rank them yourself individually, which seem to resonate with you as being most important. Talk about them among yourselves in small groups, maybe four people, turn around to the neighbors behind you or next to you and talk about them a little bit. Let us know what you think of how we've defined them, whether we're missing something. Let us know what you think about the evidence that we've cited, whether you're aware of other information or resources we should be considering. Let us know what you think the most important ways to resolve these challenges could be. And identify someone in your group who could spend a few minutes just sharing what you discussed and give us some feedback on how we're doing. If you don't see important issues on the chart, we'd like you to add them so that we have more things to think about as we move forward to develop projects with the resources we have available. So I'm just curious to know if folks are most interested in talking about college to career, or whether folks might also want to talk about any other topics. Because if you do, then we'll try to organize you by group.
I'm interested in high school to college.
Great. Anybody else in the room want to talk about high school? Okay, so why don't you kind of gather up here in this corner of the room. Are others interested in college to career? Pretty much everybody else?
We got some others, so we got college to career.
So if you could just kind of turn and face the people who are near you, who are also interested in college to career, who raise their hands, that would be super. Is there anyone interested in unemployed to employed or any other subject? Okay, that's great from our online presentation.
High school to college, and then college to career. Is that how we broke it up?
Yep, everybody else is college to career.
So how do you want to,
Well, we can just sit in with folks. And hi, you want to just talk about what subject? Up here. For us, as we've had our small group discussion.
Can I ask the reporter to come to speak so that we have a recording of it? Yeah. So you come to the front and you talk to the microphone.
Excellent. We have one group that's ready to report out on the discussions. Thank you, Olivia.
Start recording your thoughts because it'll be your turn then. But anyway, our group talked about college to career. And first we talked about a couple of ideas, some best practices, and particularly in the area of arts and media classes. You know, one of the things I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. Jeff was talking about and teaches arts and media classes is that one of the reasons things that we were focusing on was the whole remediation issue. And one of the things that we could do is get the students to write stories about what they were going to film, for example, and in collaboration with an English teacher who those students that were having some difficulties in communicating, writing that story would have the help of the English teacher to help those students that needed assistance. The other possibilities that came up as a solution was applying, problem-based learning type of techniques where students come together and work as a team. And in the particular example that we looked at, it was looking at the whole internship process. They came together as a team and they decided they were going to create a video that told and described a process of preparing for getting an internship. So they had to, interview the clients, they had to interview the people involved with offering that opportunity, and then create a video. So it required them to improve their communication skills. Then we kind of moved off into this whole topic of remediation. We really thought that this was a problem. And because we think that counselors, when you do the assessment, if you're on the borderline, they tend to push the person over to remediation as into the entry class. And one of the things that we really think is we need to take a look at why there's such a big mismatch between the requirements for graduation and requirements to get into community college. There's a big disconnect there. If we're graduating so many high school students, why aren't they ready to go into community college, if that's what high school graduation is supposed to mean? And then we had another great example, finally, is that we have a community college business communications team that puts together how to write a business letter, how to write a resume, or things using PowerPoint and Word. And this group of community college students would go to an alternative high school, usually areas where you do have some of the challenges with remediation. And then as kind of like peer mentors, you have college students helping high school students with these kind of skills, these reading and writing skills. So those were some of the ideas that our group came up with.
Thank you. Next. Okay, can you come up to me and you're going to say?
Sorry. Hi, everyone. Veronica from group back there. We sort of didn't go into order, so I'll tell you what we did talk about. We talked about the sort of solutions or ideas that we've come across. And they're sort of in three areas. Some were transition, and this was on the college to career and both, and also high school to college transition because they seem to be connected. Transition strategies, such as helping students in high school prepare before they take the remediation, the placement test, and also creating awareness about the importance of them because of what it means when they enter the institution and sort of where they place and then what they'll have to go through. We also talked about alternative assessments. Some of this work is being done in Long Beach City College around using maybe previous coursework and GPA as indicators of where students can place. I don't know if I can probably give a resource of where we can look that up. And we also looked at bridge programs as a strategy so that students who participate in a bridge program, they're in a class where English and math has been contextualized in a particular industry or area of study, and students seem to do better in getting closer to the college level, both English and math, faster, and they don't have to be going through the very long sequence of courses. Did I miss anything, ladies? Is that it? Thank you.
I didn't wear my tap dancing shoes, so I'm not quite sure I'm ready to get up here and dance yet. But so, I don't think I'll need to worry about that. My voice carries. They'll hear me in the next classroom. Which barriers are the most severe? We had a discussion on this, and we really focused, I think, on the number one being the sources of formalized exposure to employers. And because we're in the ICT industry, we get two main groups, people coming in from industry, and we also have the people coming up from school. And it's the people that are coming up from high school or coming into the college that don't understand what it is that technology is. They just think that this is their path to a career. And so they don't really see the goal of why they're taking these classes. So what they're having trouble doing is applying all that effort for something that they don't know what they're getting into. And the way that my school is trying to do is we're trying to get partnerships with businesses. I'm trying to get people from business to come in and explain how these skills are going to work. I'm just starting this coming up semester. I get people in. One of our members said the same thing about a bridge program. Our math, or I teach the Cisco program, we use a lot of binary and hexadecimal, and our students are so ill-prepared, where a bridge program of that type of specific math would be so helpful. We end up, it's about 6 chapters into the course that we have to teach our math. We start week 1 because we basically have a bridge within our course. So I'm not going to address the 5th one on accredited pathways, because that one's way beyond me and I don't understand it, why we don't do that. The counseling issue was another issue that we thought was really important, in that the counselors don't understand ICT enough
to direct students into the proper programs. In other words, they're blanketing and saying, oh, this is a great job opportunity for you, without understanding that the student may or may not have the capabilities. And I think for our discussion, I think we basically stated that maybe a little bit more familiarity of providing the counselors with a little more familiarity with our programs may help them guide our students a little better. I think that's it. How'd I do?
Okay. So our group discussed barriers high school to college. And first of all, we basically validated a lot of the points that are already on here, saying yes, amen, these are the issues. I think a couple of things that we thought we could add to the list were really around a large amount of remediation, and really the reasons why remediation is a barrier. So in many circumstances where the students test out and the gateway courses of math and English keep them from the ICT courses, we thought that perhaps the more traditional way of looking at letting students in ICT courses that way needed to be adjusted. But many times when students were allowed to take the technology courses, even though they may have lacked some of those other skills, there were successes in them because perhaps we could look at the coursework as an additional way of learning languages. And that many times it is a way of keeping students in school and encouraging them to go after some of those gateway courses may be out of order. We also thought that perhaps experiential learning needed to be focused on more in the high school educational environments, giving students more hands-on experiences, encouraging them to understand the relevance of some of the coursework. And we thought that perhaps could be increased by having, of course, we know funding is always an issue in a lot of the work that we do, but also to increasing our relationships with the corporate partners, having them perhaps assist with maybe even the funding or the relevancy for school-level stakeholders. Many times, as we've already heard, our counselors, our administrators don't really understand the relevance of the coursework, and we thought that the corporate partners could help with that. And also experiential learning helps to increase the students' belief in the relevancy of their education many times and keeps them in school. We also talked about teacher readiness. The list talks about professional development for teachers and sometimes the composition of the background of the teachers. We talked about the fact that at least in my state, our teachers are mostly business teachers. They're typing teachers, and all of a sudden we're expecting them to teach Cisco and some of the higher level technology subjects, and that this is problematic, not just because it's difficult for them to make the leap, but many times it's difficult for them to sell the technology to the students, and often they turn them off. And then in addition, we'll have teachers who are from outside subjects who teach it as though they're outsiders to the subject and also turns the students off. The last thing we talked about was the democracy of some of the classes. Many times classes are taught as though it's the techie dudes that are the ones that can be successful, and therefore they turn off students who don't really fall into that mold, and then they fall out and they feel like they can't have success in the program. So whatever we can do to create a culture that's more conducive to students of more backgrounds, or even when we really start talking about teachers, making it more successful for them to want to reach out and to grow in these areas, could increase access for the students. Is that okay?
Was there anyone else who wanted to comment, report out on discussion? Thank you so much. We've recorded all of your suggestions and we'll incorporate them into our working groups. If you want more information about our working groups, you can feel free to take my card, take the cards of anyone who is facilitating the discussion today, and also check out MPICT's website for the SF Pathways Project. Thank you for being here today, and enjoy lunch.